Hi folks, Vince again with the Tinkerer's Workshop. Today we're going to take a look at this small vise. This is something that I picked up a few years ago at an auction, and I was drawn to it just because of its size. It's quite small for a vise, and I thought it might be something that I could use. I work on a lot of small projects, and I thought it might come in handy for some of those things. One of the other things that caught my attention was the base. It's on a locking swivel base, so you can actually position it any way you want, which I thought that was kind of cool as well. So I ended up getting it. I can't remember what I paid for it. I know it probably wasn't very much, but I brought it home. I've used it a couple of times for odd jobs, but it's pretty much just sat in my shop. And as you can see, it's got some surface rust. Overall, it's in good shape, but it does have a little bit of surface rust. It must have been sitting in a barn or a garage somewhere. So I thought I would take some time to get it cleaned up and put it back into use. When I first brought this vise home, I did a little research on it to try to figure out what it was and who made it. It's stamped on the side Yankee, number 3992, North Brothers Manufacturing Company, and the base has also got a tag on it that says Yankee North Brothers, and it also says a division of Stanley Tools. And Stanley Tools bought North Brothers in, I believe it was 1946, so this vise dates from that period or later. When I was doing an internet search on this type of vise, I did see quite a few examples that were made by North Brothers as Yankee vises, and apparently they made several different sizes of these. This one, I believe the jaws are about 2 inches wide, but they made a couple that were even smaller, and I think one that was bigger. So I was just trying to find out a little bit about the history, and I did actually find one other reference in a book that I'll show you. This is an old catalog I have from a hardware store that was in San Diego. That's where I'm from originally. And this catalog dates from 1953, and inside there is an entry for Yankee Vise. And the vise shown here is a little bit different than the one I have. Mine actually tilts so that you can swing the whole thing up if you need to drill a hole at an angle. This one does not have that feature, but otherwise it's pretty much identical. And as you can see, there are 4 different sizes. The one that I have is the second to the smallest, with 2-inch wide jaws. So there were a couple that were even larger, and then one that was smaller. And then right below this entry, here they are showing with the swivel base. So you could buy the whole thing as a unit, the vise and the swivel base together. And that's what mine is. So mine would have been this second one here, the 2-inch wide one, which in 1953 that sold for $18.40. All right, this vise is detachable from the swivel base by simply loosening a little screw in the back here. So back that out, and then the whole thing just lifts off and comes apart. So that way you can set it on a drill press table or a milling table, whatever, and use it that way. So I'm going to go ahead and start taking this apart, and I'll clean up the parts and then start putting it back together. So I'll show some of that as I'm going along doing it, but I'll probably do a lot of it off camera. Alright, this thing came apart pretty easily. I started by taking off these side plates that allow it to swivel, and then there's a pin that held the vise together with this base plate, so I took that out here, and that allowed me to take these 2 pieces apart. The jaws have a couple of hardened plates that were just screwed in place. Those screws backed out from either end, so this came out. The one thing that I can't seem to get apart is this jaw. The vise screw fits into the back of this jaw, and it looks like there's a lock nut on there that you need probably a special kind of spanner to knock it out with. And I tried just taking a pin punch and striking it to knock it out, and I just started to chew that up. So I may just leave this jaw in place and try to clean around it. I pretty much at this point have it broken down to most of the components, so if I can just sort of clean around that jaw, that should be good. And then the swivel base, that came apart pretty easily too. There's just the base plate, and this is the part that sits on top. This is the lever. There was a little set screw that you back out, and then you can take this lever out, and then there was a nut that fits down through here and threads into this piece that fits in like that, and that goes in that way. So like I said, everything's apart now. I'm going to go ahead and just clean up some of the rust. I'll probably just use Scotch-Brite pads and my deburring wheel on my grinder. The rust isn't too bad, so it should clean it pretty easily. And then I'll come back when I have all the parts cleaned up. These jaw plates, they're chewed up a little bit. They've got some burrs on them, probably just from clamping screws or different things in there. So I'm going to just kind of take those off by rubbing them over this oil stone here, just to knock off any burrs or rough edges and get those nice and flat. All right, I've got all the parts cleaned up. The paint was in pretty good shape, so I decided just to kind of give it a wipe down and not worry about repainting it. But I did clean up all the rust from the surfaces, and it cleaned up pretty well with the combination of the Scotch-Brite pads and little elbow grease. So happy with how that turned out. All the fasteners cleaned up a bit. I used a wire wheel and that deburring wheel to clean those up a bit. So going to go ahead and reassemble stuff and see how it works. All right, I'm going to put the swivel base back together. I'll put a little bit of grease on this swivel part here. And that fits in there. And then there's a notch groove in the top piece. Just slides over that. This bolt fits down through here. And I'm going to tighten this up. So that locks it in place. And then this is a fixed wrench that will go in here. So if I put it right there, it should be clocked just right so that that's locked. I can move it that way to swivel it. That locks it. So that's good there. And then there's a set screw here that just keeps that wrench from popping out. All right, let's take a look at the finished product here. I was actually able to get this back jaw off. I actually looked at another YouTube channel by the name of Joe's Shop, and he did a couple of videos on one of these Yankee Vises. And from that I learned that this locking nut or collar back here was a reverse thread. So once I had that figured out, I was able to knock it out and back that off and get this jaw out, so I cleaned it up a little bit better. I don't know if you noticed it earlier, but this swivel base has 3 holes in it for screws so that you could screw it directly to your workbench, and I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to have it permanently mounted to a bench, so I just made a mounting block with a cleat on it so I can just drop that into the front vise of my workbench whenever I want to use it. It's ready to go, and then when I'm done I can just take it and stow it away so it's out of the way. So this little vise has some kind of cool features. Like I said, it swivels 360 degrees. This lever locks it. Once it's locked, it's very secure. You can tilt the vise from 0 to 90 degrees. So if you need to drill an angled hole or work on a piece at a weird angle, you know, sometimes it's more convenient to have something at an angle when you're working on it. You can do that. Move it all around any way you want. So pretty versatile in that regard. If you back this screw out, I think I showed you this earlier, but you can back this locking screw in the back here. It's kind of hard to reach, but once you back that out, the whole thing comes off, and then you can take it over to a drill press. There are a couple of lugs here for bolts, so you can bolt it to a drill press table or a milling table and use it that way. Just get it back on there. It did also come with a V block, so that can just fit right in here. If you want to clamp up round stock, just fits right in. You can fit it in that V block and it'll hold round things pretty easily. So all in all, pretty versatile vise. Like I said, I'll probably use it for some of the smaller projects that I like to work on, and I just thought it was kind of handy and kind of a cool little vise. So that's the Yankee Vise, and thanks for watching.